Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. We are going to talk about the social and emotional development or the socio-emotional group for this evening. However, we will focus on the moral development theories. Now, socialization approaches and cognitive development theory have provided two major approaches to studying moral development. First is the socialization approaches, which focused on the development of conscience through guilt and internalized behavior, typically measured in terms of compliance. And secondly, cognitive developmental theories, which emphasize developmental changes in moral judgments and reasonings. While important differences persist, contemporary approaches have attempted to integrate thoughts, emotions, and behaviors and have stressed the importance of social interactions. The rise of evolutionary-based accounts have led to more research with infants and studies incorporating neuroscience, furthering our understanding of the complex nature of moral development. Now, moral development theories include those theories formulated by first Piaget, second Kohlberg, third Turiel, and lastly Gilligan. For most of the past century, much of the psychological theorizing and research on moral development has stemmed from two distinct traditions. First, learning, socialization, and internalization perspectives, and secondly, cognitive or structural developmental approaches. Now, these theories differ in how they define morality and in their hypotheses regarding its origins and developmental processes. In the first section, we described how early theorists such as Piaget, Kohlberg, Tullier, and Gilligan helped to shape the assumptions, questions, and methods of later developmental research. We then discuss empirical findings from different perspectives and examine how contemporary approaches have developed from these foundations. We emphasize that traditional divisions have become less entrenched as theorists have begun to recognize the dynamic, integrative role of emotions, thoughts, and behaviors in moral development. Finally, we briefly discuss recent trends in moral development research from an evolutionary perspective. Now, what is moral development? Moral development is equated or sometimes defined as the children's reasoning about morality, their attitudes toward moral lapses, and their behavior when faced with moral issues. So, what makes for morality? Accordingly, morality is made up of first, concern for others, second, shame and or guilt, and third is the cognitive factors, which includes understanding and even role taking. Well, children behave or children choose not just by thinking about the right thing to do, but they decide on acting on it. Now, what are the developmental stages in morality? For infants, it is considered as amoral, wherein young infants do not understand right from wrong. Basically, they don't have or they don't think that they're doing is considered right or is considered wrong, and that they don't even know what does it mean to be right or what does it mean to be wrong. For example, children or infants tend to do thumb sucking. As a parent, you choose to remove the children's hand or tail and try to make the infant understand that thumb sucking is wrong. However, they wouldn't understand the fact why thumb sucking is wrong because for them, they are just doing what they want to do. and that they don't have the ability to understand what is right from wrong in their young age. For children, moral training can be done by first, shame and guilt, second, impulse control or internalized rules. For example, children at this age or children aging from 2 and above or 2 to 7 tend to play with each other and harm them. As a parent or as a guardian, you'd talk with your child and tell him or her that what he or she is doing is actually wrong, and that if he doesn't want others to do that to him as well, he shouldn't be doing it to them. And lastly, sensitive and responsive parents can also help in the developmental stages in morality. So they can discuss issues and they can also be firm but not harsh to their children. In conclusion, moral development refers to the ways we distinguish right from wrong as we grow and mature. Very young children generally do not have the same moral development as adults. Think about your behavior as a young child. How did you decide if something was right or wrong, or good or bad? Did you follow what your parents did? Did you copy the behavior of your friends? At one time or another, you probably did both. When were you able to decide for yourself what was right and what was wrong? Do you currently base your decisions on societal or cultural laws? For example, is it wrong to steal because the law says it's wrong? Or do you ever feel that the morally correct decision conflicts with the law? Let's say that your mother is dying and needs a specific medicine to be cured. That medicine costs thousands of money that you and your mother do not have. Would it be okay to steal the medicine to save her life? These are also some types of questions that Lawrence Kohlberg also asked while studying moral development in human beings. Now, how do we know that difference between right and wrong? This lesson will explore the stages of moral development, which is the process by which human beings develop the ability to distinguish between good and bad behaviors. The first theory under the moral development theories is Piaget's stages of moral development. Now, we've encountered Piaget earlier under the cognitive theories. So, who is Jean Piaget? Jean Piaget was a Swiss psychologist and genetic epistemologist. He is most famously known for his theory of cognitive development that looked at how children develop intellectually throughout the course of childhood. Piaget was principally interested not in what children do, but in what they think. In other words, he was interested in children's moral reasoning. Now, Piaget was interested in three main aspects of children's understanding of moral issues. They were, first, children's understanding of rules. This leads to questions like, where do rules come from? Can rules be changed? Or who makes rules? Second, children's understanding of moral responsibility. These also leads to questions like, who is to blame for bad things? Is it the outcome of behavior that makes an action bad? Or is there a difference between accidental and deliberate wrongdoing? And lastly, children's understanding of justice. This leads to questions like, should the punishment fit the crime? Or are the guilty always punished? Now, Piaget also suggested two main types of moral thinking. They were, first, heteronymous morality, otherwise known as moral realism, and the autonomous morality, otherwise known as moral relativism. Piaget found that children's ideas regarding rules, moral judgments, and punishment tended to change as they got older. In other words, Just as there were stages to children's cognitive development, so there were also universal stages to their moral development. Now, Piaget's stages of cognitive development were earlier discussed, and they were the sensimotor or sensory motor, pre-operational, concrete operational, and the formal operational. The first stage of moral development lasts from birth to approximately age of 2. At this point in development, children know the world primarily through their senses and motor movements. The, the pre-operational stage lasts from the ages of 2 to 7 and is characterized by the development of language and the emergence of symbolic play. The concrete operational stage lasts from the age of 7 to 11 years old. At this point, logical thought emerges, but children still struggle with abstract and theoretical thinking. While the formal operational stage, which is considered as the fourth and final stage of cognitive development, it lasts from age 12 and into adulthood. Children become much more adept at abstract thought and deductive reasoning. Now let's move on to their stages of moral development. First is the heteronomous morality, which starts from age 5 up to 9 years old. It is also known as moral realism, or the morality imposed from the outside. Children regard morality as obeying other people's rules and laws which cannot be changed. So it is the initial stage of moral development, and they believe in immanent justice, or the immediate punishment for infractions. Now, children accept that all rules are made by some authority figure, wherein they can be their parents, their teachers, or even God, and that breaking the rules will lead to immediate and severe punishment. Now, the function of any punishment is to make the guilty suffer, and that the severity of the punishment should be related to severity of the wrongdoing. Now, rules are also seen as invariant, unchangeable, and beyond child's control and or influence. During this stage, children consider rules as being absolute and unchanging. They think that rules cannot be changed and have always been the same as they are now. Behavior is judged as bad in terms of the observable consequences regardless on the intentions or reasons for that behavior. Therefore, a large amount of accidental damage is viewed as worse than a small amount of deliberate damage. Although they recognize the distinction between a well-intentioned act that turns out badly and a careless, thoughtless, or malicious act, they tend to judge naughtiness in terms of the severity of the consequence rather than in terms of motives. This is what Piaget meant by moral realism. Piaget was also interested in what children understand by a lie. Here he found that the seriousness of a lie is measured by younger children in terms of the size of the departure from the truth. So a child who said he saw a dog the size of an elephant would be judged to have told a worse lie than a child who said he saw a dog the size of a horse, even though the first child is less likely to be believed. With regard to punishment, Piaget also found that young children also have a characteristic view. Firstly, they saw the function of punishment as make the guilty suffer. Paine called this retributive justice or expiatory punishment, because punishment is seen as an act of retribution or revenge. They also believed in what Piaget called immanent justice, or that punishment should automatically follow bad behavior. For young children, justice is seen as in the nature of things. The guilty, in their view, are always punished in the long run, and the natural world is like a policeman. In other words, Young children interpret misfortune as if it were some kind of punishment from God or from some kind of superior force. Now, Piaget described the morality described above as heteronomous morality, which means that a morality that is formed out of being subject to another's rules. Of course, for young children, these are the rules that adults impose upon them. It is thus a morality that comes from unilateral respect. That is to say, the respect children owe to their parents, teachers, and others. However, as children get older, the circumstances of their lives change and their whole attitude to moral questions undergoes a radical change. An example of this is how children respond to a question about the wrongdoing of a member of their peer group. Young children typically tell on others. They believe their primary obligation is to tell the truth to an adult when asked to do so. Older children typically believe that their first loyalty is to their friends and you don't grass on your mates. This would be one example of the two moralities of a child. Now let's talk about autonomous morality, which is also known as autonomous cooperation stage, beginning at 10 years of age. Additionally, it is otherwise known as moral relativism or morality based on your own rules. Children recognize there is no absolute right or wrong and that morality depends on intentions, not on consequences. They become fully aware that rules may and can be modified if people playing agree. Now, Piaget believed that around the age of 9 or 10, children's understanding of moral issues underwent a fundamental reorganization. By now, they are beginning to overcome the egocentrism of middle childhood and have developed the ability to see moral rules from other people's point of view. A child who can decenter to take other people's intentions and circumstances into account can move to making the more independent moral judgments of the second stage. As a result, children's ideas on the nature of rules themselves and moral responsibility and on punishment and justice all change and their thinking becomes more like that of adults. Children now understand that rules do not come from some mystical divine-like source. People make rules and people can change them. They are not inscribed on tablets of stones. With regard to the rules of the game, older children recognize the rules are needed to prevent quarreling and to ensure fair play. Indeed, sometimes they even become quite fascinated with the whole issue and will, for example, discuss the rules of board games or sport with all the interest of a lawyer. They also recognize that rules can be changed if circumstances dictate and if everybody agrees. With regard to issues of blame and moral responsibility, older children don't just take the consequences into account. They also consider motives. Children begin to realize that if they behave in ways that appear to be wrong but have good intentions, they are not necessarily going to be punished. Thus, for them, a well-intentioned act that turned out badly is less blameworthy than a malicious act that did no harm. It all goes to show, in Piaget's opinion, that children are now able to appreciate the significance of subjective facts and of intentional responsibility. Children's views on lying also change. The seriousness of a lie is judged in terms of betrayal of trust, and they now recognize that all lies are not the same. And for example, you might tell a white lie in order to spare someone's feelings. Children also recognize that if someone says something that they do not know to be the case, this doesn't necessarily mean the other person is telling a lie. It could be that they made a mistake or that this is a difference of opinion. Overall, lying is now considered wrong not because you get punished for it by adults, but because it is a betrayal of trust, and undermines friendships and cooperation. With regard to punishment, oops, with regards to punishment, the emphasis now moves from retribution to restitution. Its purpose is not primarily to make the guilty suffer, but to put things right again. In other words, punishment should be aimed at helping the offender understand the harm he or she has caused so that he or she will not be motivated to repeat the offense, and wherever possible, punishment should fit the crime. Say, for example, when a vandal is required to make good the damage he/she has caused. Older children also recognize that justice in real life is an imperfect system. Sometimes the guilty get away with their crimes, and sometimes the innocent suffer unfairly. For younger children, collective punishment is seen as acceptable. For example, they would not disagree with the whole class being punished for the misdeeds of a single child. For the older children, it is always considered wrong to punish the innocent for the misdeeds of the guilty. Overall, Piaget describes the morality of the older child as an autonomous morality, or morality that is subject to its own laws. The change is partly seen as a result of the child's general cognitive development, partly due to declining egocentrism and partly to the growing importance of the peer group. The reference group for children's moral beliefs is increasingly focused on other children, and disputes between equals needs to be negotiated and compromises made. In place of the unilateral respect the younger children owe to their parents, an attitude of mutual respect governs relations between peers. Now, in conclusion, Piaget's theories continue to be studied in the areas of psychology, sociology, education, and genetics. His work contributed to our understanding of the cognitive development of children as well as their moral development. While earlier researchers had often viewed children simply as a smaller version of adults, Piaget helped demonstrate that childhood is a unique and important period of human development. His works also influenced other notable psychologists, including Howard Gardner and Robert Sternberg. In their 2005 text, The Science of False Memory, Brainerd and Rayner wrote of Piaget's influence, quote, "In the course of a long and hugely prolific career, he contributed important scholarly works to fields as diverse as the philosophy of science, linguistics, education, sociology, and evolutionary biology. Above all, however, he was the developmental psychologist of the 20th century. For 2 decades, from the early 1960s to the early 1980s, Piagetian theory and Piaget's research findings dominated developmental psychology worldwide, much as Freud's idea had dominated abnormal psychology a generation before. Almost single-handedly, he shifted the focus of developmental research away from its traditional concerns with social and emotional development and toward cognitive development. To further understand Piaget's stages of moral development, I am going to play a short video discussing these theory.
Piaget's moral development and aggression. Moral development is people's sense of what is right and wrong. Piaget believed that moral development occurred in stages. By interacting with the social and environment condition, children learn what is right and wrong. As stated earlier, Piaget's moral development theory said that there are 3 stages in which children learn morality. The first stage, the heteronomous morality stage, the second stage, the incipient cooperation morality stage, and the third stage, the autonomous morality stage. The first stage, this occurs in children ages 4 to 7 years old. And at this stage, children see rules as unchangeable. That is, the rules are whatever the authority says it is, and justice is whatever the authority says also. And if rules are broken, imminent justice follows. That is immediate punishment. So children may view each other as either being good or bad by the consequences of their actions because they do not know about intentions and motives. So they may view a child who breaks one cup on purpose being better than a child who breaks three cups on purpose because to them they see the more objects broken, the more punishment they will acquire. The second stage occurs in children 7 to 10 years old. And at this stage, children begin to interact with their peers more, and they can see rules, and they see that rules can be changed if the group agrees upon it. And at this stage, they also begin to take one's perspective and to cooperate more. So they have a easier time at taking turns, and they value fairness. At the last stage is the autonomous morality stage. This occurs in ages 11 or 12. At this stage, children no longer accept blind obedience to authority as the basis for moral decision. They understand rules are a product of social agreement, and the majority of group can change them if they agree. They seek fairness and equality of others when constructing rules. They now understand that our motives and intentions direct our actions. Therefore, punishment should fit the crime. Children who have poor supervision, harsh discipline, parental disharmony, rejection of the child, low involvement in children activities are at an increased risk for aggression. Ways to help children with aggression is, first of all, because children are social learners, it is best to demonstrate socially positive actions. Also, give comfort, praise good behavior, talk it out, and let them get physical to blow off steam by either punching a pillow, stomping their feet, or other safe physical activities.
Now, our next topic is about Kohlberg's levels and stages of morality. Now, before we discuss about it, who is Kohlberg? Lawrence Kohlberg is an American psychologist and educator known for his theory of moral development. He graduated from Phillips Academy in Massachusetts in 1945 and enrolled at the University of Chicago, where he completed a BA in psychology in 1 year and PhD in psychology in 1958. He subsequently held teaching positions at various institutions before settling at Harvard University in 1968. While pursuing his doctoral degree, Kohlberg became interested in Jean Piaget's work on the moral development of children. According to Piaget, children naturally progress from a form of moral reasoning based on the consequences of an act to one that takes the actor's intentions into account. Kohlberg interviewed 72 lower and middle class white boys, presenting each with a moral dilemma: whether it would be permissible for a poor man to steal medicine for his dying wife. Now the children's responses become the basis of his six-stage theory of moral development. Now, the nature and the cognitive and emotional determinants of moral judgment have been empirically studied since the emergence of the science of psychology. Although one of the first systematic theories began with Piaget, the first systematic theory based on empirical research was introduced by Lawrence Kohlberg. Kohlberg's theory is regarded as a rationalist theory since it assumes that the main determinant of moral judgment is rational thinking processes, even though it is thought that emotional or intuitive processes are also involved, at least in part, in moral judgment. Now, Kohlberg applied Piaget's theory to the development of moral thinking. Borrowing from Piaget's pre-operational, concrete, and formal distinctions, Kohlberg came up with the stage theory you see here.